So I'm just going to walk through the checklist and do some of the startup here of the 172. The 172 actually has a really thorough checklist, and some of it is pretty easy or trivial, like aircraft documents. There's nothing to really do there. Parking brake usually is set to begin with. Ignition is off to start. Avionics off. So now we're going to start by turning our master switch, alternator and battery on, and this is just to confirm some things, and then we'll quickly turn those off. So battery and alternator on. Primary flight display is lighting up. We'll give that a second. It wants us to check the fuel quantity indicators, which are looking good. They are showing half full. We want to look at the low fuel left and right annunciators and make sure those are off. And those are indeed off. I think that would show down here. And oil pressure, make sure that it's checked on. Oil pressure annunciator anyway. So that is here in red. It's giving us a warning. There is no oil pressure because the engine's not on. So this is a confirmation that that's working as expected. And low vacuum, again, that annunciator, that warning is indicated here. So we'll check that that's on. And we'll go ahead and turn our avionics bus 1 on. And I'm being quiet because there's a slight tick or a slight little fan noise you can hear. So we've turned that on, and we want to check and confirm that we've heard that fan turn on. And then we'll go ahead and turn bus 1 off. And then we're going to switch to bus 2, turn it on. And a similar fan can be heard. And we'll turn that off. Check. And then our pitot heat, which is in green here, we'll go ahead and turn that on. Make sure it's working. Make sure nothing blows up. Turn that off. Back off. And then our low volts annunciator should be on. And it is indicated here. So again, because we don't have, I believe that's because I'm actually not sure why that's indicated, because maybe we just haven't started up and the alternator is not powered necessarily by the engine. That's why you have the low volts possibly, but it is being displayed as expected. And then now we can turn our master and our battery and alternator off and continue with the rest of the checklist here. Our trim wheel down here, it should be in the takeoff position, and it is. There's a line indicating where that should be. If it's too far up or too far down, you'll get unexpected takeoff results. From your elevator and fuel selector, make sure it's set to both. That's a little bit hidden down here, but between left tank and right tank, there's the both indicator. So if we kind of switch between the two, you can kind of see both is lit up, and we want it to be on both, and it is. And then our static pressure alt source valve, which I believe is here. So we'd pull that to be on, and we push it to be off. And so it is in the it's in the off position, which is checked. Cool. So before starting the engine, we've done our pre-flight inspection. So normally you do a walkthrough of the airplane, maybe lower your flaps, check fuel, check your gear, check external surfaces, do all that stuff, check the propeller. All that's good. We can assume here, and we're strapped into the plane now. We've got our seat belts adjusted and locked. Now we can test our brakes. So I'm going to zoom out just a little bit and use my rudder pedals that I have here and just press the brakes and ensure that those can be pressed. And that is good to go. Circuit breakers, all of these guys here are pushed. They are not ever unpushed, so you can usually breeze through this one. And electrical equipment, everything is off right now, which is correct. Avionics master switch, the bus 1 and bus 2, or the avionics switch bus 1 and 2, those are off, which is good. And fuel selector, as we previously indicated, is back to both. And fuel shutoff valve needs to be open. So that's way down here, and we don't want to pull it because to pull it we'd be off, so that would be limiting or turning fuel off. We want it to be on in this particular case, which is the same as saying open. And you can also say fully pushed in or open. There's some ambiguity there between the language, but we know right now it is open and fuel should be flowing when we start up. So let's go back up here and look at our primary controls. So we want our throttle. We want to go ahead and open it by just 1/4 of an inch. So I'm going to push that in slightly, and that's good. And our mixture, we want to go ahead and pull that all the way out to a full idle cutoff, which it is. And then our standby battery, we'll go ahead and we want to test that for 20 seconds. I'm going to cut that short by quite a bit. We'll just test it for 5 seconds or so. Make sure the light stays green and nothing blows up. And that is the case, so we're good to go there. And standby battery switch, arm. I'm going to go ahead and turn that on. And what we're testing for here, make sure that the primary flight display comes on, which it is. So that's good, meaning our standby battery is operational, has enough volts to power the PFD, and we can go ahead and check that that's good. We're going to leave that armed for now, but we will eventually turn it off once we get started, because you don't need your standby battery to be running. You want to save that for when you need it, if and when you need it. Now that the PFD is on, we're checking for engine indication. Check the parameters, just make sure that nothing engine related is showing red X's. We have some red X's on our comms, but that's okay. And nothing is red here except for the oil pressure, but at least we're getting readings on everything. So everything is activated. No red X's are displayed through the engine page indicator, so we can actually switch here, and the same for the system layout page. And so we'll check that. And our bus E volts, make sure it's 24 minimum. Let's zoom in a little bit here. So down in this section, we've got the bus E volts is 24, and that looks good. Bus M volts, it should be 0, so it should be less than 1.5, which it's at 0 because we haven't turned that on yet. The main, we still only have the emergency or the standby battery enabled. So bus main is at 0, battery S amps, the standby battery amps should be negative, and it is. It's showing less than 5, meaning we're discharging and we're not receiving reciprocal charge from the alternator. So that's correct. Standby battery annunciator, check that it's on, and it is showing here that, hey, it's warning you your standby battery is active and in use. If that's a deviation from normal procedure, and so it's showing you the warning there, and it is displaying. All right, so now for the propeller, we're getting ready to start, so we want to make sure visually that the prop is clear, and you might even open the window and yell clear prop to let people around or behind you know that you're about to start the engine. And visually in this case, we can confirm, except for this guy who we can't get rid of, the propeller area is clear. So we'll go ahead and tick that. Now it's going to want us to turn the master battery on to help us with our startup. So let's go ahead and do that. Move my checklist up a little bit. So both the alternator and battery, turn those on. And that is looking good. And we're going to check that. And then once we have that enabled, we'll turn our beacon on. Check mixture, make sure it's rich. Fine. Auxiliary fuel pump. We'll go ahead and turn that pump on just to kind of prime the engine. We're cold. We want to put some fuel into the engine, or into the tubing, I guess, to facilitate a start. You don't actually need to do this in the game. It'll start up fine without that, but it's just kind of a simulator type of thing. So check, we turn the fuel pump on. Mixture back to lean. So when we start, we're not wasting too much fuel. And lean is check. Feet still on the brake, ready to brake. Parking brake on, so that's good to go. Ignition, we're ready to start. So we'll switch this to start, and it'll automatically switch back to both. But as soon as you do it, you immediately want to rich your mixture so the engine doesn't quit on you. So good, we've started the engine and we've riched the mixture. And after starting engine, just a couple more checks here. We'll go ahead and turn the go ahead and adjust our throttle to about 1,000 RPM. Got our RPM gauge here, and we'll go ahead and just bump the throttle up a little bit until we see 1,000. And we notice our oil pressure is at the lower end of green, and oil temperature is at lower end of green. Those should start rising just slightly within about 30 seconds, And that's what we're validating here, that at 1,000 RPM or so, that we're going to get proper pressure and temperature of oil. So throttle at 1,000, oil pressure, check. And now battery, the main and standby battery amps, verify the discharge. So now we've got a positive flow on the amps for both batteries, 22. And make sure our low volts annunciator is gone, which it is. And now we can turn our avionics on. Bus 1 and 2. Very good. Our flaps are up, which is hidden down here. Flaps are up. Check. And we're ready to go. We can do a couple other checks here for taxiing. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and clear the GPS. And we're actually going to tune to some automated weather if it's available, tune to tower, things like that. Make sure we have, they have ground services here. So we can actually request our taxi, get directions to the taxiway, and start doing some of these checks as we're taxiing. So we want to depart. I'm going to check my flight plan again here real quick. It looks like we're targeting a departure to the east, and you can confirm that through the flight plan. Our first route is going to be, our first desired track or first course is 059, which would be roughly east-northeast, and you can also confirm that here with our magenta line is pointing to that easterly direction. Doesn't really matter too much, but we want to be fairly accurate with our departure, and we'll go ahead and ask them to give us clearance.
Cessna Alpha Sierra X-Ray Golf Sierra Alpha, ready to taxi east departure.
Cessna Alpha Sierra X-Ray Golf Sierra Alpha taxi to and hold short of runway 23 via taxiway Alpha. Contact tower on 122 decimal gate when ready.
All right, so they've given us instructions to taxi and hold short runway 23 via taxiway A.
Taxi to and hold short runway 23 via taxiway Alpha Cessna Golf Sierra Alpha.
Read that back from them, and we're going to basically continue with our checklist here. Parking brake. So got my feet on the brake, and we're going to release the parking brake, and we're going to give ourselves a little bit of throttle here. Collapse this. Our RPM has moved over to the side now that we've got both displays open, and just give it a little more throttle, about 1100, 1200 or so, just to get the wheels moving. And the very first thing you're going to want to do, release our parking brake, and you want to confirm that your actual brakes work. So we've done a brake check there, everything's good, and we can also test our rudder. We can move left and right, switch to our external camera, make sure rudder is moving. Looking good. Alright, so let's do our run up here. Now before we do that, I'm going to just check my directional. So we've given clearance for runway 23, which would be kind of outside of the plane, roughly that way. So we're going to make a hard right turn here to the other side of the runway, absent any signage to tell us where the start of that runway is. We just got to kind of use our compass and use our brains a little bit. And the same thing with the taxiway. You can kind of assume this is taxiway A because there really isn't any other option here. So another confirmation too would be looking at the windsock, that we're going to turn kind of with the wind at this point, and we want to, because we're going to turn back and we want to take off into the wind once we reach our departure point. All right, so as we're doing that, we're going to do our run-up check here in a second. And we'll go ahead and stop here. There's no traffic behind us, so nothing to worry about in terms of blocking. It's safe to do our run-up right here on the taxiway. Sometimes there's special spots for you to do it. So in this particular case, we're gonna run through this pretty quick. Set our parking brake and make sure our seats are engaged and locked. Seat belts are on. Doors are closed and locked. Flight controls are free and clear. We've already tested that. We can move. Make sure we can turn and move and there's nothing obstructing us there. Primary flight display, there's no red X's, which is good, meaning we're getting signal from all of the inputs. And Next thing, so check our barometric pressure. Now, we don't have an automated weather. Right now, we can assume it's the default pressure. I have standard weather on or enabled in game, so that would be something you would want to confirm and find, a local source for barometric pressure just to make sure that your altimeter is reading correct. And there's other ways to double check that as well. But right now, our altimeter seems to be correct. Although we're pretty low, I guess we're near water. We're near surface level at just around 130 feet or so. So baro was good. Standby altimeter. Let's look down here. So our standby, same reading, giving us about 130, 140 feet, which is good. And altimeter. All right. So we in our flight plan. Ooh, that's wrong. It's showing us wanting to fly at 100 feet. So I'm going to go ahead and switch views here, and we're gonna correct that in the flight plan because we had created this through the world map, but unfortunately it's given us kind of a faulty reading here. In this particular case, I'd like to cruise at around 1,500 feet, let's say. So let's go ahead and see if we can't change this to 1,500. And again, I've never really been here before, but I can assume if we're at 1,000 feet here, we want to be a good 1,000 feet above surface, above obstruction. So we're just going to guess right now 1,500 feet. There's other ways to get that information by looking at your chart. Whoops, I didn't enter it. We'll fix that here in a second. Again, switching the input over to that, and then we'll switch to the second digit here, 1, next digit up to 5, and then enter, and then it's corrected the rest of our waypoints all the way through the end of our flight to 1,500 feet, which is awesome. So now we'll take our cursor away, and now what we were trying to do in the first place was set our altimeter. And you can do that too. There's two different knobs here. One is on this secondary display, and here's one on your primary, and it's going to affect this value here in blue. So we'll go ahead and change the first knob to 1,000, and the second one we'll set to 500. So altimeter is now set, or desired altitude is now set. And standby flight instruments, we've seen one of them. We've got airspeed looking good, and our other gyro here is looking good as well. So now fuel quantities up here, both looking good. Left and right tank both have fuel. Mixture is full rich. Let's confirm that. All set. Fuel indicator, fuel selector is on both still. No problem. Autopilot, we can engage. It's not going to do anything, but it's going to help us for our next step here. So moving this against autopilot, we can move the yoke. It's not really giving me the aileron control, but we're going to go ahead and tick this as acceptable. The AP trim and disconnect, so we won't have an option here to temporarily turn that off. It toggles autopilot off, and then we're good to go there, and it's having us turn flight director off now, so that's not bothering us. Elevator trim, set for takeoff, still set. Throttle, okay, here's our magnetos check, so we're going to bump our throttle up. I'm going to use my control stick here. Bump this up to 1,800. I've got my feet firmly on the brakes, and the parking brake is applied. Probably want to check behind us to make sure we're not throwing dirt and rocks up at people or other aircraft, but so we'll say 18, 20, perfect, 1,800. All right, now we're going to toggle through our magnetos here real quick just to make sure that we're getting the appropriate differences. So from both to left, and we drop by 120. So we don't want to drop any more than 150, so that one's good. Now we go, when switching between left and right, the same thing. We stay at 1680, which is good. Shouldn't be much difference between those two, and then back to both. And our RPM should rise back to 1,800, roughly speaking. All right, so that's good. All right, vacuum. That is right here. So vacuum should be in the green, and it is. Engine indicators, everything's still no X's. Everything's still looking good. Oh, I got to drop my throttle back down. So nothing's wrong with our engine indicators. And our ammeter and voltmeter, make sure that everything's looking good. So we still have our standby on, making sure there's no at least 24.5 volts, and that's looking good. Has a value greater than -1. Let's make sure we have this correct. Yeah, okay. And at least 24.5 volts. Alright, looks good. Annunciators, make sure nothing's displayed. Where previously we had seen them in this right column, nothing's displayed. Back to idle, good to go. Probably should have saved that for when it was necessary. So now we're ready to adjust back to 1000 RPM. Alright, before takeoff, now these are important. Comm frequencies we've set, we've already tuned in to tower or to ground, and we're going to tune the tower next. Let me readjust my view here. Good to go. Navigation frequencies, we're using the GPS, so that's already set for us. If we were using VOR or some other navigation, we'd want to make sure we have those set. And we make sure we have a flight plan. We do. We've checked our altitude, we've checked everything here. So good to go. Transponder, this is something I forget a lot. So take away our engine detail here, go to exponder, hit that, and make sure we have altimeter set. We want to not only to turn the transponder on to broadcast our VFR frequency, which in Canada is 7,000 for whatever reason, but we want to make sure it's also transmitting our altitude. So transponder is on, and CDI soft key we'll take this transponder away. So our CDI key is correct. We could toggle between the different options of the different radio localizers or frequencies, but in this particular case we want GPS, which is correct. So we have the correct CDI selected, and our 12 volt switch is off. We don't want that enabled while we're taking off, and it is off. And we can set our flaps. I'm going to go ahead and do that and set that to 10 using my controls here, watching it move down here. I looked like I put it a little too far. I got to keep it in that notch for 10 and set to 10. Alright, cabin windows closed and locked, parking brake release. Let's do it.